People in Appalachia are often dismissed. They're for the forgotten Davids that face off daily against different Goliaths, be they political talking heads or corporate interests aiming to take advantage of them. We're often treated as numbers and caricatures, but we're anything but caricatures. We named this podcast We Are West Virginians, and we're going to make it a way to learn about issues that affect your life and share each other's stories, knowing that the more we learn each other's stories, the more power and solidarity we find. I'm Ace Parsi, and I'm running for U.S. Congress. Welcome to the We Are West Virginians podcast. This podcast is one of the ways that I get to learn and share your stories, your challenges, and your solutions to overcome the Goliaths that do us harm. Today, we're going to have our very first episode, and I'm joined by two friends. Usually, we won't, when we do these episodes, it's not a given that these two people endorse me. But in this case, I will assume that they are endorsing me because they are two of my lead volunteers. And we're going to talk a little bit today about what brought them to this campaign and what their hopes are and their stories, because their stories form who we are as a campaign. And so when you interact with me as the candidate for the campaign, you should know that I never do anything alone. And I'm really grateful to be able to have these incredible human beings joining me. So I'm joined by my campaign treasurer, Larry Banta, and Vicky Smith, who leads our traditional media outreach. Vicky and Larry, welcome to We Are West Virginia.
Well, thank you. Honored to be here.
Thanks for having us.
All right. Well, so I often say when I'm interacting with people that if I could do anything to have Kamala Harris have won that last election, I would do it. Which means to me that if I could have not have a few new friends in that process, I love you both, but I would go with that right now for the betterment of
I
the world.
would hope. I would hope.
We all would.
But
Yeah.
but a byproduct of the fact that this has happened is that a lot of great people have gotten to know each other and form community and be with each solidarity with each other as we take this journey together. So I met the two of you actually when we formed Mountaineers Indivisible Citizen Action. And just for reference, Mountaineers Indivisible Citizen Action is a local resistance group that's based in Morgantown. I used to be the president of that organization, but I stepped away out of that because we wanted to run this campaign. I still remember. I don't know whether you all were when you all came into that, but we had these meetings in the basement of a Church of the Brethren. And then suddenly, like it was President's Day last year, and we went to the First Presbyterian Church, and we were expecting 50, 60 people, and 200 people showed. And then there were 400 people that showed to meetings. We had this hands off rally that had 1,500 people there. We had our No Kings rally in October that had another 1,500 people came together. We were meeting in the streets at the time. So take me through each of you. The election day happened. A lot of us felt like it was a gut punch. Tell me for the two of you, and I'll start with Larry and then go to Vicky. Tell me for the two of you what it meant to join that sort of resistance effort. So Larry, why don't you start and then we'll go to Vicky.
Well, like you said, after the election, from November and December, I was in a funk. I was angry. I was sad. I was, sort of in disbelief or denial that this really could happen, and then in January, when Trump actually took office and started creating his mayhem, the anger took over from the sadness, and I resolved to do something. That's when we found out about Invisible and came back, and the first church, or the first meeting in the First Presbyterian Church was my first meeting with Indivisible, and I was inspired. And so I volunteered to be on the comms team, and that's how I met Vicky, and spent a lot of the first part of it just looking at strategy. I was resolved to do something, and Indivisible gave me an outlet for that in terms of the protest, the resistance, and fighting back, and so I was involved the No Kings marches and the hands off march and so on. But I also wanted to see some kind of a strategy for going forward. Resistance is great, it's necessary, and demonstrations are absolutely a powerful way to show resistance. But I also wanted to see something about a vision. So what are we for? Where are we going? And how can we find, a vision for uh, an America that everybody can get behind? And that's, when about the time when you started talking about running for office, and I just came to this campaign because it felt to me like I'm not going to not work with Indivisible, but this felt like a much more powerful way for me to spend my time and talents in helping to move that whole vision idea forward.
Thank you so much, Larry. For let me move to Vicky before we go into that. Vicky, what drew you into that sort of move?
Yeah, I think my emotional journey was a lot like Larry's. I saw the train coming down the track. I saw that Trump was going to be elected again, but when it actually happened, I was just devastated, and I kept thinking to myself, how could we do this? How could we as a country be here? So I spent a couple of months just with a lot of anxiety and frustration, and then after he actually took office and started wreaking havoc on the country, like Larry, my feelings turned from just depression to rage. And I have my whole activist journey, which is in its fledgling stages right now, has been driven by rage, to be totally honest, and needing a constructive way to channel that, to feel less rage and feel more empowered. And so, I my first indivisible meeting was that one of 200 at the church at First Presbyterian, and I walked in there and thought, "Oh my God, I'm not alone." And that was a really big thing that a lot of people were feeling, and I got some people to come to the next meeting with me, because what I knew was that a lot of people were feeling the same way I was, helpless, angry, and just alone. We are in a deep red state. On the road I live on, there's a guy who's been flying a Trump flag for many years, and it's you just feel surrounded like you're in hostile territory. And I went to the church and I thought, these are my people. It's not just us. And what was incredibly powerful was to see that number double the following week, right? We went from 200 to 400, and it was so exciting and empowering. And we did the No Kings marches, which one of the coolest things I've ever done in my life. I am not an activist. I was not an activist. I've become one, to keep my sanity, and to be productive. And I needed a way to channel that so that I just didn't sit here and doom scroll.
Yeah,
I
yeah.
read the news all the time, and sometimes that's not good for my mental health.
No, that's absolutely. I think that
Yeah.
that is. I mean, there's so many aspects of that connects with me. One is just, we know from, uh the former Surgeon General that this sort of doom scrolling is really, really bad for your mental health, and it's to do because it, one, isolates you, it makes you feel like you're alone, and it just feeds the algorithms feed on your rage. So, that idea of how we come together and, build community. I just remember that, at the time everybody was asking, who are the adults in the room, right? Who are surely the Democratic Party is going to step up. Surely big corporations are going to step up. Surely this person will step up. And nobody was stepping up. And it just made me think, oh my God, we're the adults in the room. How scary is that? And that is to me that is the fundamental core of any sort of successful movement, is that when the people see their own power, they engage. Now, I wanna really highlight, personally, I find Donald Trump very objectionable as a human being, but I don't find Trump supporters. objectionable. I know that those are a lot of our constituents, and those are people that we're trying to reach. And just last week I went to a senior center in Clarksburg, and I talked to so many people that were former Democrats, and they've now voted for Trump, or they turned independent. And I wonder, both of you have been in West Virginia now for a while, and you've seen that change. What to you has caused that change? Because I've been in West Virginia now for 10 years, but I came in here when it was a strong red state. So what in your experiences, can either of you speak to that? What brought about that change?
For me, we came here, my wife and I moved here in 1986, and it was still quite blue at that time. But um, I guess I can contrast that with what I see now. If I had, and I joined the fire department, my local volunteer fire department. I live out in the boonies, and I joined back in like 88, 89, 89, I guess. It's a rural volunteer fire department, so it's pretty heavily conservative. And as the years have gone by, my politics have not changed that much, but the people in the fire department have. Um, I think I've tried to figure this out, but I think the cliche, they're people that have gotten left behind. I mean, I think that, and we can look at how's that relate to the Democratic Party, but just in my experience, there still is a lot of commonality, and I'd like to throw that out there as a sign of hope because
Yeah.
they know the people that I work with in the fire department are almost universally Trumpers. They know my politics. I make no um, bones about that. But um, I also know that these are people who share a lot of the same values that I do. Despite our political differences, the people in my fire department are folks that will get up out of bed at 2 in the morning and go out and scrape a stranger up off of the road, and take him to the hospital or crawl around in some on fire structure, and they do that because they want to give back to their community, and I can't turn my back on that. And in fact, it's a great sign of hope for me that we all want to have, a fair system that we play in. And so I think there's a lot of places where we can build bridges, Ace. And I think that, you know, your trip to the senior center hopefully really was that beginning of that wedge that we can put out
Yeah,
there.
I mean, I really felt it. I felt that, these people were not happy about losing SNAP or Medicaid or these programs. And so to think honestly, what the Democratic Party has done, and this is the knot that we're gonna try to crack in this campaign, that has disenchanted so many people, who don't like these policies, but vote for the candidates that support them. What the Democratic Party has done to do that, that's gonna be one of the big nuts to crack in that. But so Vicky, you were starting to talk about your career as a journalist and what brought you into that space,
Yeah.
and the
So,
insights that gave you.
So I started working as a journalist full time in West Virginia in 1996. So 30 years ago. I worked for the Associated Press, which meant I covered news about West Virginia from all over the state, including a couple sessions of the state legislature. So I got to see this state from pretty much every corner at some point during those 17 years that I was an NAP reporter. And one of the mistakes that I think people make about West Virginians is seeing us as some kind of simple and homogenous group. And I think that West Virginians are fundamentally more complex in their thinking than we give them credit for. For example, we were a 2-to-1 Democratic voter registration state. However, our Democrats are what we would call dinos, Democrats in name only, right? They weren't really progressive liberal people. They had pretty conservative values. Historically, they became Democrats because of the labor movement.
Mhm.
People don't realize West Virginia has this really powerful, compelling labor history story. The Battle of Blair Mountain. I mean, the Pinkerton detectives and the movie Matewan was required viewing whenever I started working in West Virginia because my boss wanted us to understand the history of the state. I think a lot of people have forgotten that history. And that's one of my personal frustrations. And when I get frustrated with Trump supporters, I have to remind myself of several things. One, we live in different echo chambers.
Yeah.
And there are two things that I think have really contributed to the change, which was your original question. The rise of the Tea Party and just the explosive expansion of social media and people
Mhm.
just kind of hearing what they want to hear and only interacting with people who um, agree with their preconceived ideas. And the labor history is especially interesting to me because um, I feel like a lot of us have forgotten where we came from and have forgotten that we're the reason that we have, you know, black lung programs, that we have NIOSH. We have these things that focus on the safety of our workers because of our history. We used to have dozens of people a year die in mine explosions, and we don't have that anymore.
Yeah.
And somewhere along the way, we forgot our history. Um, but I would just say that even in those days, we were 2-1. We were really pretty conservative Democrats, and I think Joe Manchin is a really good example of that, right? He was really a Republican, but he wore the label of a Democrat, right? And I think that we are fundamentally as a state more conservative. And so that's kind of how I see that shift happening over time.
Yeah. I've mentioned, and I really mean this, I feel sad often. I mean, I feel angry about the policies and I feel angry about the authoritarianism. But I honestly, at my core, at my best days, at my best self, I feel sad for Donald Trump because of the things that you mentioned, Larry. I mean, Trump supporters often have this value of service to something larger than yourself. They're police officers, they're firefighters, they're teachers, whoever they are, and that Vicky, to your point, they are the part of the labor movement. And so I've talked to a lot of labor leadership that are Democrats, but they're like my rank and file or not. And so how we talk to American labor will be a really important part and actually advocating for them. I am incredibly passionate about our teachers and this, even recently what they did with the strikes and everything. um, I think that we need to be really laser home in terms of being that advocate and walking hand in hand with the labor movement. Um, and I think that that will also get at one of our core messages, which is around affordability. I was talking to a labor leader just the other day, and he was just saying, "Look, my energy bills, just $500 for just my energy cost, my energy bills." And so that's sort of affordability when Trump calls, affordability a hoax. You can see that in your receipts. That's not the case, right? And we need to talk to actually kind of these issues that affect them, and because those issues, um, are not this sort of culture war social media stuff. They are the core of people's lives. They are, I think about them in the context of my mother, who we grew up very low income. And I think about the stress that is in people's bodies when you feel like you can't deliver for your kids or you're a little bit away from not being able to afford your mortgage. So I think we have to speak to that. We never will, while we will say things against Donald Trump, we will never say anything against Trump voters because they are also our voters. So I thank you, yeah, for both noting that, and Vicky, to your point, these programs, and now maybe hopefully that came NIOSH and these programs that came in because people in West Virginia advocated for them, that now got doged. Um, Hopefully, this will show what the values of the current administration is, and that will point us to something better. So, Now, as we're getting a little bit further in, I wanted to, you, both of you are, and I know you, um, you have communities, you have talents, you could be giving that in any variety of different channels. But you're joining our campaign. And so there might be people listening to this and saying, well, why would I join this campaign? Why would I volunteer? Why would I engage? My question, I guess, to you is, tell me why. And this will help me also hold myself accountable because I want to be the candidate that continues to have talented people like you volunteering for us. So tell me, let me start with Vicky this time and then go to Larry.
Sure. Um, why you? Why this campaign? So, I am 60 years old. I've never ever participated in a political campaign. Period. Not even for like town council or something. I was always the journalist on the other side, covering it. What that means is I have 30 years of experience as an observer of human behavior. And I have a pretty I'm a pretty good judge of character. I can tell when someone is authentic and when they are not. And what I saw in you during those indivisible meetings was someone who was passionate, genuine, authentic, and in it for all the right reasons, not for self gain,
Mhm.
not for um, not to stroke your ego. Like you were motivated by the right things. And when you approached me to participate, one of the issues you just talked about is issues. Our first conversation was about issues and where you stand on things and what's important to you. And I think that's what's been lost in politics. Like, we've become this cult of personality, and we're not talking about issues. And if we can cut through the chatter and the personality and the labels, and we can actually have a conversation with people about issues that affect their lives, I think we can have real change. And then the last thing I'll say on why I got involved was, um, I will continue to support what Indivisible is doing, and I will go to those marches, and I will continue to be very vocal on social media because I have to believe that somewhere out there in the wilderness, my post is going to resonate with some person, and so I'll continue the protests and those things. But I needed a more concrete way to channel my energy and my skills, and I came to realize that really nothing is going to change if we don't change the people who are making the decisions in this country. And we have a Congress that has abdicated its responsibility, that has forgotten who it works for. And we will not fix the problems in Washington until we replace some of the people in Washington.
Yeah, thank you, Vicky. Um, yeah, Larry.
Well, yeah, a similar thing, although I'm a few years older than Vicky, and so I was, I did protests against the Vietnam War in the late '60s, early '70s, and when I look around the crowd at the Indivisible all hands meetings, it's a lot of old hippies like me, it's a lot of gray hair out there. But like Vicky, I spent most of the intervening time just complaining and voting for Democrats and being disappointed often, although, there have been some bright spots. But you know, by and large, you were talking about why did the West Virginia leave the Democratic Party, and I think it was more the Democratic Party left the people here. um, during much of my lifetime, the Democratic Party has been sort of captured by educated elites, and we were very condescending. I mean, I know that, we talked about the rednecks and we talked about the hard hats and we talked about, our message was, "Hey, we're smart. We know how to do this. Just close your mouth and leave it to us and we'll handle it all." Well, yeah, yeah, and we did a pretty bad job of it even then. So, I think that it's a matter not there's been a lot of talk about messaging, but there it's been a matter of listening also.
Yeah,
That, you know, the Democratic Party, a lot of it has been more about policing the language, telling people, "Oh, you can't call these people homeless, you have to call them unhoused." what roof has that ever put over anybody's head? People don't wanna be, told, "Oh, that's politically incorrect," and in fact, that's really one of the one of the major early on, one of the major things that people were rebelling against is political correctness, and now it's called woke, I guess, but, um, it's insulting. It's insulting and useless. So, I, like Vicky, I was a bystander for a while, and but I look now and I see there's two groups of people that we really need to reach. Um, and one of those is young people. And young people are completely um, disenchanted with the political system. Um, they just don't see that, anybody who is in their 80s has anything in common with them or knows, what their problems are, um, or, is even empathetic to it. So, I think that even though, I'm now in a position in my life where I could, have the time, I'm retired, I have the time, I could do something political, um, and may yet at the state level. I mean, politics in West Virginia is a hobby. It's not really a job. You go to you're in session for 2 months of the year, and so it's not possible for people with jobs and families and so
Yeah.
on to do that. But, you know, I wanna support somebody young and dynamic who can reach these people that, I used to teach, that are, that they have something in common.
I'll disagree in part, but not in whole. I think that what you're describing is accurate. I think that sometimes we invalidate human beings because they're not using the right language. But I'm struck actually by, I guess, the youngest advice that I got, and this was a challenge that I was having maybe in March with everything. And my 10-year-old daughter gave me this advice, and she told me that she calls me Baba. She said, "Baba, um, you think that all these people are trying to mess with you and and needle you, but they're just scared. They you're not the biggest character in their life. They're just scared and they're trying to express that." And I think that there is some aspect of this that both on the MAGA right and the very left, people are just scared and they want to be seen as human beings. So ultimately, whether you call them really woke or really right or really left, what our job in this campaign is going to be see people as human beings and really validate their concerns and build a bridge to them, because I think that there are deeper interests at play here that want to get political wins on the cheap. And you get political wins on the cheap by getting two people who have very shared interests to start believing that the other side, the other person is their enemy, rather than going at a shared enemy. So that is going to be one of our core core tenets of our campaign and how we reach out to people. And that may piss off some people. So that may not be pure enough for some people, and that may be off. But I think that that's we're comfortable losing that sort of campaign rather than the one that alienates
Mhm.
anybody because we're not seeing them or they're not feeling valued by us. I want to close this session and just thank you both. And the one thing I know about America is that sometimes when you feel like all hope is lost, normal people come together and they surprise the hell out of you. So let's go into this campaign and surprise the hell out of people. I want to thank you both again for being part of this journey with us. I will be the candidate, but I want everybody to know that I don't ever do anything alone. And I am so grateful to do this with you all. And other campaigns are fueled by corporate cash. Ours is fueled by energy and stories. So this is one mechanism that we're going to tell stories. We're going to also invite other people to share their stories in other ways. The main thing that I'll ask people right now who are listening is join our mailing list. We're going to have all sorts of information around our social media posts so you can gather our stories through that post. Like, obviously, try to follow us but join our mailing list today. And join our movement. We're going to be a hopeful movement. We're going to speak back to all the people that say that nothing's going to change this time around, and we are going to change things. So thank you so much to the two of you and to everybody who's listening. And I hope you have a great day, night, whatever time of the day you're listening to this. Have a great one.